Glance Technologies owns and operates Glance Pay, a disruptive mobile payment technology now live in 16 cities in Canada and about to launch in the US. With revenues up 664% in the last quarter, Glance Technologies has the potential to be a worldwide leader in an industry projected to grow to $1.3 trillion in 3 years. Glance Technologies stock symbols are GLNFF in the US and GET in Canada. Find out more at glancepay.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
Stewart, Vancouver has the highest gasoline prices in North America, beating out places that even have to have it shipped in by ship or airplane. That's an incredible thing. We have the BC Premier, John Horgan, saying there's some kind of conspiracy to keep Vancouver prices high, but is there a conspiracy?
Well, I had a look at this suggestion that we had from the Premier, and bottom line is, if there's a conspiracy in Vancouver, the same one applies to all of Canada, because exactly the same up and down price trend applies to Canadian gasoline prices as applies to Canada, as applies to Vancouver. The difference being that in Vancouver we pay 50 cents, give or take, per liter in all the taxes that go on to a liter.
And Vancouver also exclusively has the TransLink transit tax, 17 cents a liter tacked on.
Yeah, so it's quite a burden. I think you have a fairly high one in Montreal, but we've really got the one that stands out the most. That explains more than any other single factor why prices are so high.
We have the Vancouver city government also declaring cars are, a bother, a nuisance, unnecessary. But are they, it sounds like Vancouver wants to ban cars outright if they could. But how are people supposed to commute in from far out communities like Squamish or Abbotsford? Yeah, and
I think it's a matter of options. People who live in densely populated cities in Canada, who have jobs in public policy, who cycle down to City Hall to go and make the world a better place, in their view, I don't think they are thinking about the family that lives in Surrey, let alone in Whitehorse or Revelstoke or any other rural community in Canada, where you have to be able to get around in your own private vehicle. And those people are going to be carrying a lot of the burden disproportionately, and they don't have options. They can't say, I'll take the SkyTrain instead. Obviously, there isn't one. So I think when policy is made by people who are blinkered, who live in these sheltered places, who are maybe ideologically oriented a certain way to change the world a certain way, that isn't really what the average person in Canada, average voter wants. I think a lot of people, a lot of voters are not aware of that, and why it is so important right now. If we the congestion pricing on the table for Vancouver, Greater Vancouver, to how families who don't live in the West End or Kitsilano would have to get around and pay for their movements. So, we don't even know, we can't even begin to say what those impacts are, nor what it means for someone who lives in a place that's served, say, by the Massey Tunnel, who depends on that tunnel. Because right now, there's no investments planned for that. You'll pay the congestion charge, sure, but you won't get better service. I think a lot of voters are going to be wondering why they are benefiting from any of this.
Well, cities like London do have a congestion charge, but London also has the world's oldest underground train system to make sure that commuters can get around. Vancouver in no way has enough rapid transit to meet the needs of the Lower Mainland.
No, a place like London is heavily concentrated. There's so many options, not just the underground. You've got the buses, you've got bicycles, you can walk, ferries on the river, all these different ways you can get around. And we just simply don't have that in our cities, most of them.
Well, because, cars are evil now in Vancouver, because of that one city's policies, the entire Lower Mainland is affected by it. Are they short-sighted, or are they trying to push people in a direction that they would love to go but can't? Again, electric cars would be nice. Where do you charge them up? I don't see a lot of charging stations around the city.
Yeah, well, to me, it comes back to one of the themes that we see in so much of our public policy right now, which is innovation versus prohibition. You know, there are people who won't ban things they don't like. People want to ban cars because they don't like internal combustion engines. These people are not creative thinkers. They are like the prohibitionists of the 1920s who said everyone has to stop drinking alcohol because I don't like it, and we're going to smash their barrels of beer. That's the prohibitionist tendency. I think the innovation one is the smarter one. It's the one I subscribe to. I think you too, Jim. It's the one that says, look, the solution we have now isn't perfect, but we can keep making it better. We can make those engines more efficient, less waste, use less fuel. We can innovate in all kinds of different ways. Right now you've got options like the car to go. That's those little smart cars. I use that when I need to. I have a card for it. Actually, it's now just an app on my phone. It used to be a card. And I can pick up one of those cars when it's convenient. It's an internal combustion engine. They've got some electric cars, which is cool. But it's a car that is a very small engine. It gets me exactly to where I want to go. I can drop the car. Suits me perfectly. That's innovation. It's such a contrast to the prohibitionist mentality, which is what I think dominates in City Hall, probably in Ottawa, and I think in parts of the government provincially as well. And I think people who are common sense in their outlook, who are practical, creative problem solvers, are the ones who really need to assert themselves more right now and say, look, don't go banning my car. That's a dumb idea. But I totally support you wanting to make it run cleaner, use less fuel, all those good things. Agree?
Vancouver City Council has done their best to ban cars from Vancouver. They've taken away tens of thousands of parking spaces downtown, and now, of course, 25,000, 30,000 fewer cars visit downtown Vancouver a day. And the city's response is our parking revenue is down, so we have to put up parking rates. Well, their high parking rates are the things that chased away the business in the first place.
Yeah, and, those downtown cores, that's also where businesses go because obvious reasons. And when they can't allow people to get to meetings easily, when it's difficult to move goods or more expensive because parking is more expensive and it's more restricted, that affects the consumer experience because they have to pay more and choices are less limited. I don't think that these policies to just simply choke out traffic are going to work that effectively. I mean, of course, you have to manage things, make it better in some ways, but I think a lot of this policy is made by people who are just simply zealots.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after the break.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp. Inc., MGI on the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected high-grade gold, including 16.9 meters of 13.58 grams and 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program is planned to further evaluate previously identified subsurface high-grade gold mineralization. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
MGX Minerals is revolutionizing the new energy economy with patented lithium extraction technology, replacing traditional solar evaporation using low-cost, low-energy nanofiltration. The first system of this paradigm shift technology is currently being commissioned. MGX Minerals trades on the CSE, symbol XMG, the OTCQB, symbol MGXMF, and Frankfurt, symbol 1MG. For more information, visit our website, mgxminerals.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, Green Party leader Andrew Weaver keeps putting out tweets and other pieces of propaganda saying that oil and gas only bring 2.2% of Canada's income. Is that true? And is he finding some distorted figures from some secret site that I can't find?
Yeah, I know that he's a real sucker for some of the poorly researched economic propaganda that is meant to support the propositions that we don't need the oil and gas economy or mining or forestry or those kinds of things. This is funded, I think, by the, solar, wind industry. They have been big backers of the Green Party, give them a lot of money. And, I think those solutions can be great. I'm not against them, but I think there's a distortion when you see someone who's in a powerful political position spout this nonsense, because the fact is that the thing that pays the rent for Canada as a country, in a figurative sense, not exactly literally, we don't write a check for our rent, but there are economists who use this phrase: Canada pays the rent with its crude oil exports. And that's because you just take over the last 5 years, crude oil brought in and created exports worth $340 billion. Now, you can't tell me that, say, a solar panel business in the future in Canada is going to create a $340 billion export industry. It's not going to happen.
Why do you think he keeps putting out these distorted figures that, if you try to check them using Stats Canada, which is supposed to be neutral in its outlook, why doesn't he use those numbers?
Well, I think it's the aim of propagandists to repeat a lie until it seems true. You know, if you look at the thing that really matters, that I'm concerned about, is that our national merchandise exports right now are in deficit. And they have been consistently every single quarter since, I believe, late 2016. We've seen that every month as well, actually. And we've seen a long-term problem in this regard for many years. We consume and import more things than we export. And there's other factors as well, like services, and that's definitely important. But I think when you just simply take the goods trade, we are in this deficit. In the month of March alone, it was $4 billion more that we consumed than we sent away for money. And the problem here, of course, is that the things that you want to buy that are imported, iPhones or orange juice or your Hyundai or whatever, you have to pay for them somehow. Otherwise, you can't get them. It's no different in the world of global trade than it is going down to the 7-Eleven to buy a newspaper. You got to be able to pay for it, and the thing that lets us pay is crude oil. We have a very considerable monthly trade surplus that comes from crude oil. It's always been that case. We've imported some crude oil from places like Saudi Arabia and the U.S., and that nevertheless is still quite a small part of our total trade in crude oil. And so if you were to take crude oil out of our exports, which is what Andrew Weaver, the head of the Green Party, wants to do, you would probably double our monthly trade deficit. And you would also create lots of other problems of unemployment in the economy of Canada. It would be a huge thing. But people like Weaver, the reason that he's saying, oh no, it's only a tiny percent, don't worry about it, is because he's trying to make people think that if we got rid of it, as he says, it wouldn't be a problem. Well, Jim, it would be a gigantic problem.
What is the real income Canada gets from exporting oil?
Well, if you look,
what proportion?
Just 1 month, it would be $4 billion in or $5 billion in trade surplus. So after we've accounted for the crude oil that we buy from other countries, we got $5 billion left, kind of sloshing around in the economy. It might be in the pockets of companies, it might be in shareholders, and some employees or governments get some of it, but it's inside the economy, and it gives us this incredible buying power. When it comes to energy imports, the energy component of the economy, the lion's share of our energy trade is from crude oil. And I think that the confusion is when you take maybe an employment number and you say, oh, look, there's not that many people who work directly in oil and gas compared to, the restaurant industry or something. And that's true. It is true. But what it overlooks is the fact that our oil and gas industry in Canada is probably the most, not only innovative, which it is, but the most productive, the highest exports per capita per worker. And so even though the number of workers is not that high, their output is just absolutely prodigious.
Yes, and also governments love income taxes. Who pays more income tax, an oil patch worker or a waitress at McDonald's?
Well, that's right. If someone is drawing, $14 an hour as a chambermaid to tidy hotel rooms, that's an important job, and we all respect that. But $14, they're not paying much tax on that, probably very little income tax at the end of the day because of our system of taxation that puts most of the tax burden on the highest earners. And so there's, almost no tax impact from that $14 an hour. But that oil sands worker who's pulling down $200,000 as a welder or looking after a machinery and working, very hard job is paying, half or more. If they're on overtime, maybe more of that income is going to taxes. So that's huge. One person paying $100,000 in taxes compared to someone at near minimum wage paying virtually nothing. I mean, it couldn't be more different. And yet people like Andrew Weaver, they just count single jobs. That job is the same as that other job, as if they're all the same. I find one of the great ironies to me is that Dr. Weaver, he's already got his nice public sector pension as a university professor that we're all paying for or will be, and then he's working on a second one. And so he's going to, in old age, he's going to have 2 public sector pensions, and he will have spent his career pretending that the economy doesn't exist the way that a rational, normal person knows it does exist. In Canada, that means we have a strongly resource-focused economy. Our exports are what make the Canadian way of life possible. And people like him are just in denial about it. I think it's a real insult to voters and the public in general when you see that attitude from people like that with their propaganda.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test numerous targets located by recent groundwork is planned for early 2018. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, isn't there some kind of ratio about how much Canadians pay in carbon tax and so on compared to other people in the world?
Well, if you listen to some of the critics of the Canadian economy, you'll hear them say, well, Canada is such a terrible country. We use too much energy. Our greenhouse gas emissions are out of control. This is terrible. We have to become a climate leader. You hear this phrase all the time. Canada must be a climate leader. British Columbia must be a climate leader. You've heard that phrase. And, I was looking at a report from the World Bank that has come out, and I was kind of floored by what I saw there. In fact, I tweeted about it in my Twitter, which is SJ Muir. I've been doing that for a long time. And it's quite surprising because right now carbon pricing is coming into governments around the world. Especially since that climate treaty was signed a couple of years ago in Paris, there's more countries that are putting into their policies some way of dampening the use of fuels that produce greenhouse gas emissions. That's carbon pricing, and carbon cap and trade is part of that. Also carbon taxes like we have in BC.
Well, what do those numbers say about Canada, and how does it compare to other countries?
Well, right now, so far, around the world, there's 70 jurisdictions. 45 of them are countries, and 25 of them are, states, provinces, that kind of thing, depending on the country. 70 in total that have implemented or are going to implement carbon pricing initiatives. Actually, it's lower than that. It's 69 because one of them on that list is Washington State, which recently said, you know what, we're not going to do that. We're not interested in pricing carbon. Let the Canadians do that if they want. We're not going to. Anyway, so it's almost 70, and it's detailed in a new report called State and Trends of Carbon Pricing 2018, obviously one that's already out of date. But nevertheless, I was looking at this report, and I was thinking, wow, a lot of those, there's a map. It shows all those countries and places. And you look at how many of them are from Canada. Well, it turns out that 20% of the world's jurisdictions that do something active about carbon pricing are in Canada.
I was going to say the world's coldest nation.
The world's coldest nation. Yeah. And yet we're the one, we keep reading about Canada. There was some nonsense out this week attacking the Prime Minister for, this awful decision to send Canadian crude oil to the world. Of course, this is one of those American studies, and it's America that is just pumping out the oil and gas like crazy. Their LNG, crude oil exports are growing, building pipelines left, right, and center, and yet you never hear the international Greenpeace types talking about that. They're absolutely silent. They don't give Trump any grief whatsoever on this. It's just about Canada. Got to stop Canada. What is it about Canada they hate? It's hard to say, but their facts are definitely wrong, because we are the ones, actually, who are the climate leaders. When we have 20%, our population is 0.5% of the world's population, but 20% of the world's carbon taxes are Canadian. Go figure.
Also, in the courts, two rulings, I think it's number 15 and 16, against the opponents of the Kinder Morgan pipeline from Edmonton to the Port of Vancouver. Does that give any encouragement to the people in the natural resource business, or are they just rolling their eyes because they know those court decisions will likely be appealed?
Yeah, well, those behind those measures, they have plenty of cash, and they'll probably appeal if there's any appeal possible.
So far, the cities of Vancouver and Burnaby have not said how much they have paid lawyers to fight the pipelines, which have already been approved by the provincial government and by the federal government.
Yeah, well, is it a surprise they're keeping that information secret? They're passing that along to ratepayers, to homeowners, to their tax bill. That's being passed along to renters. People talk about Vancouver being an expensive place to live and rent. Well, spending $1 million or a couple of million or 10 million, who knows? They're keeping it a secret on lawyers to fight something that's not even their jurisdiction, and is also, inconsistent with protecting the world's climate and environment. Is just, I think, typical of the arrogance that you see at some city halls, particularly Vancouver and Burnaby city halls right now. And ultimately, it's voters who will make up their mind on that. I think when you see that a string of lawsuits, now it's 16 in a row, and you struck out 16 times, a rational person would make some conclusion from that. Perhaps they would change their game. Not so the city of Vancouver and city of Burnaby. They seem perfectly content to burn through some secretive fund they have, or some bottomless pit of taxpayer dollars in these quests.
Stuart, where can people find out more information about your organization?
Well, the way to find that out would be to go to resourceworks.com. We've got lots of information. We're always bringing out new stuff. And your Twitter handle? Well, you can follow me, thanks for the suggestion, at SJ Muir, SJMUIR. Find me on Twitter. I'm out there frequently telling the facts on the resource economy and how the overall system of how our great life in Canada works. Thanks for being on the show. Thank you, Jim. My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. Our very popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show or for our guests, like Stewart, can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening. Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.